Hey, look at that. The link worked first time today. Thank goodness. None of the gremlins of last week. So
No.
Welcome. It's midday. It's Wow Ergonomics. We've moved to a Thursday this week. We will be again next week as well, because Stephen has to go and watch the test match or something. Is that right?
No, Graham. I'm going back to my previous job of going out to see people.
Oh, right.
I'm going out to see someone next Wednesday. So yes, thank you to you and our loyal band of followers to allow us to move to Thursday next week.
Yeah, you have a real job as well. That's a great thing.
I don't just spend an hour on every Wednesday with you, Graham. Believe it or not. So as much as fun as we have, no.
Well, yeah, it's good to clarify that, because I think maybe people think that's what sometimes we do is do this sort of thing and have fun, and it is fun. But we do cover some topics as well. Now, we were talking just before we came on air about some of your videos as a company. I particularly like the new one, actually. If people haven't seen this, they can go and Google or they can have a look at your Backer Elkhuizen LinkedIn page, or they can Google it if you're on a different platform. Tell us what are we seeing happen in the latest video?
I mean, all our videos are based around a concept of a guy called Robert, who I guess is a typical office worker. And obviously our solutions are built around sort of around office workers, and he features throughout all of our videos. So he's a Dutch actor. Obviously, we're a Dutch organization, and it's all filmed in the Netherlands, all of our sort of product videos. But the idea is it's this same sort of common theme. He's a very, very a very tall guy with glasses, so he's instantly recognizable, but people can relate to him. And he features across all of our videos. So whether it's working on new keyboards, whether it's talking about our software, the most recent one, I think, I don't know whether you're referring to this one, is to do with some of our acoustic solutions, to do with headphones and headsets. So he's got involved in that. So I guess it's just picking developing the videos with a bit of a theme, and in terms of something that people can relate to, so Robert, you'll see, we're just working on some more campaign material now, and Robert's going to be featuring that. I won't tell people what the new solution is, which is coming out in the next few weeks. But again, it's using this guy as a constant to show how he adapts his working way and how he integrates our solutions into his working day. So, but he's quite a distinctive guy, and people relate to him, and the name Robert then becomes quite a common theme, and people look out for him. So yeah, that's it. It's probably pretty straightforward, but actually quite a clever way of promoting our solutions when we bring new solutions out, or whether we're just updating the market on what else we do.
Well, so if people are interested in the next health and wellbeing event, which is going to be the kind of the middle to end of next month, the 19th, I think we set as a date.
We did, yes.
And we're going back to an afternoon slot, so 3:45 in the afternoon. If you've got a health and wellbeing business out there, would highly recommend that you come, because what we're going to be talking about this time is how you market a health and wellbeing product or service online, because we've all had to learn to do this in a different way. How long have you been at Backer now?
Coming up to 2.5 years.
2.5 years. So not terribly long, but you were aware of Backer obviously before that, etc. I mean, I can remember Backer online advertising going back quite a long time, and it's certainly changed over the years, and I think it's changed drastically in the last few years. So I think it's important for businesses to understand how they reach their market now, and how they cut through the noise, because there's so much. There's so much out there, so much information out there. How do you make a difference? How do you hold your head up above the parapet? And as you say, you've got this theme going on, which tries to you're creating a character which hopefully people then recognize, and it becomes a bit of a thing. It's a little bit like when Apple came back with the "I'm a Mac, I'm a PC," that kind of thing. and there needs to be a little bit of empathy there with the character on the screen. You kind of feel an element of yourself being in that character, so that you understand what that product or service actually offers you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you say, Graham, actually, it's probably 50% of my time with Backer was probably pre-COVID, and 50% of it's probably been sort of post-COVID. So as I say, the change in just my role alone has been quite significant, from moving from that external role of going out to see people to actually having to really embrace, things like this. I mean, Wow Ergonomics has been going about for sort of 5 or 6 months now, but this was not the sort of thing that I actually built into my working day, purely because my role was defined as something else. But actually, it's been really important to get involved and, dip my toe into these sort of things. A lot more focus around social media. I mean, we as a business predominantly work with LinkedIn. From a professional perspective, we don't really get involved in other platforms such as Facebook, such as Instagram, etc. We've not really found there's a huge amount of traction. But I think as an organization, we've really embraced LinkedIn, both as an individual level, so for me and my equivalent colleagues in other countries, but also as an overall business through the Backer Elkhausen. And obviously we have a sister company called Ergo Direct who work in the Netherlands. So, it's been really important for us, going back to what you were saying there about how to promote yourselves. Actually, it's been really important that we have made sure we are promoting ourselves, making sure our content is relevant, making sure it's interesting. And we've had a lot of our partners sort of look at what we've done and taken it on board. So we are preparing material for our partners for them to use. So we're creating the content and sharing it with our partners. So the great thing about this event coming up in sort of 3 weeks' time will be how to take all that great content, not just from us, there'll be other good content out there as well, and actually using it effectively. Because as we've discussed on numerous occasions, there's a lot of noise on LinkedIn, and there's a lot of very good stuff, but a lot of it can be quite bland and maybe doesn't help businesses put their head above the parapet and above the competition and what makes them stand out. There's a lot of quite generic, almost as if people are doing it because they need to tick a box, where actually it's a really, really useful professional tool, whether it's from a marketing perspective, maybe it's just getting people to know a little bit more about you as an individual. I know we've talked about the fact that people come on and say, oh, it's not Facebook and all that sort of stuff, but actually it's a platform to say, actually, this is my business, this is who I work for and I represent, but actually this is me as a person, because it all goes back to the old classic people buy from people. And ultimately, that's still very relevant. It may be not as relevant because of the fact there's been less face-to-face business taking place, but it's still really relevant that people engage with the person they're going to work with. So yeah, I think it's been, a real learning curve for me and for our business, but it's been, really effective as well.
I don't want to give all the secrets away, otherwise people won't come to the event on the 19th. But, beyond that as well, I will talk on the day about different platforms as well, because for me, I mean, it makes sense that a company like Backer will focus on something like LinkedIn, because you're predominantly selling to, as you say, partners or dealers who then go and sell direct to the end user. But how many of those partners or dealers are actually looking at additional platforms other than LinkedIn? Because when you start dealing direct with clients or people directly who are actually buying your product, then you can filter into other platforms, and it's not necessarily that all of your eggs should be in the LinkedIn basket.
No.
It can be that even things like Instagram, and I know as soon as I mention something like Instagram, a load of business people will go,
I start rolling.
I start rolling. Why on earth would I do anything on Instagram? But there's a logical progression if you think about it. At the end of the day, a business is full of people.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to win the business of a business, an end user business, and their people see your product on something like Instagram and have an emotional buy into it, then it makes it so much easier, even at sort of at the conversational level or the more business level, to get buy-in once you start talking to that business about the product, etc. If people within that business have already bought into it from an emotional and psychological point of view. So, not all selling on, or not all content on different types of platform is about, if I put this here, that's going to end up as the order. Sometimes it's just about, do you know what, these people have bought into the life, the messages of our product and service through whichever platform it is. And now that I approach this group of people, when we start talking to the management about it, and then the management start talking to their staff about it, they go, yeah, we love that product. It's and that buy-in is important.
Absolutely. Because sometimes you are trying to win hearts and minds. You're trying to maybe implement change, and if there's an awareness of a product or a solution or a service or whatever it would be, you're not coming in cold. So actually, it's really useful that there is a level of awareness out there, even if it's a case of, I remember seeing something,
I've seen it.
They were talking about that, or whatever it would be. It's half the battle. If something, a lot of people don't like change, do they? So actually, if it's something they're already familiar with on some degree, or to some degree, it makes it become a little bit easier then to roll it out or implement it, because there's a little bit less resistance to something they're familiar with as opposed to something they've never heard of.
Now, apologies for anyone that's tuned in today expecting to hear about chairs. We were going to get a chair manufacturer on. We can't get a chair manufacturer on today. Something's happened. So we will get a chair manufacturer on another week. So sit tight for that. Get it? Sit tight for that. That will happen in the future. But do explain. We've got a guest coming on next week. So just explain who we've got coming on next week to whet the appetite of people.
So we've got a lady called Jodie Greer joining us next week. And I first met Jodie about 16 months ago. So she was involved in the whole inclusivity piece at Shell at their headquarters. But her reach was beyond the UK. So I had some great meetings with her, predominantly talking, around our solutions and how they'd be able to look at that within an organization like Shell. But Jodie, as of the start of this year, has set up her own business, and she's now sort of, offering her sort of experience and services out to the wider market. So she's going to join us next week, and predominantly focusing around inclusivity in the workplace. So it'll be really interesting, as I say, on the back of everything that's gone on around, where people are working, but how to make sure everyone's involved in that whole process. So that'll be really interesting to hear from her next week. She's very, very busy, clearly doing very well after sort of 4 or 5 months of working and setting up on her own. But we've lucky enough to secure some time with her. So look out for Jodie joining us next week for part of Wow Ergonomics next Thursday.
I really look forward to that. Now, I just want to take you back to last month's health and wellbeing event that we've just done, which had a focus around students. Any particular takeaways from that event?
I mean, the whole event was really, really interesting. As I say, you mentioned before around timings, Graham. We sort of mixed the timing up, didn't we, to try and draw in another audience. So we sort of looked at something over the lunch break, sort of 12 till 2. I mean, its student area isn't an area I'm particularly familiar with, but it was really interesting to understand a lot more around how students' opinions are really being sought out and then used to change things going forward. So I know that we'd had a couple of guests who were particularly talking around the sort of student voice piece. It was great to see that they were being engaged and maybe not being told this is what you're going to get, but actually, what would you like to see? What's your experience? How would you like us to change things for the students that follow in 1, 3, 5 years' time, whatever it would be? But as I say, it's an area I'm not totally familiar with, but was really interested. And I think we had a separate conversation where we tied in with a couple of the guys around themes that were very similar to what we've spoken about on Wow Ergonomics, was around how geography potentially no longer influences where people study. So, would courses stay online going forward? Obviously, there's been no decision, whether they'll permanently offer online, whether they'll require some in-person presence at a lecture. But I think it was the example. I mean, there was an example I threw out, just something that cropped to mind was, what if someone is a student in Plymouth and the only place they can do their degree is maybe up in Aberdeen? Actually, does geography now go out of the window when it comes to universities? So people maybe don't have to move away from home who don't want to, or they don't have to move as far away from home? Does it mean they can maybe commute every day? Does it allow for a reduction in the number of sort of dropouts or changes? So because someone actually can do whatever course they want to do, and I appreciate there'll still be some sort of review as to who qualifies for the course, but does it actually increase participation? Because actually, I wanted to go to do that at Durham. I can't. I now have to go to, wherever it would be, maybe Worcester or whatever it would be. But that wasn't really what I wanted. But actually, they're now able to really sort of take on the courses they want to do, because geography is no longer, or potentially is no longer, a player in course selection.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting. Then it's about the knock-on effect that has. I mean, student populations, when they go to an area, are a big population. So if we don't see in the future, if we don't see so many students actually travel out of here, there, and everywhere to these city destinations, for example, what again does that have in terms of an effect on the infrastructure? Now that leads us very nicely to a story that you put in on LinkedIn. Was it this morning or yesterday?
Yesterday.
Yeah. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I have to say I do look at the BBC's business sort of section on a regular basis, but I have to say it gives us some great stories, some of the content that we discussed, and I think it was all focused around the London Corporation, who I think are responsible for the square mile in the city, and they are already they've engaged with businesses within that area, and are already looking at moving a number of those commercial premises within that square mile and actually looking at converting it to housing or living spaces. And I think the number was 1,500, if I remember rightly, that was quoted. So it was really interesting to see that all this talk there's been about returning to the office, etc., that we know is happening, but I think some people still think, but it won't. And, going back to our friends at Goldman Sachs with wanting everyone back in the office and all that sort of thing. But actually, serious players in the property business in London are now acknowledging and almost readying themselves for the fact that there is going to be a lot of space suddenly becoming available, and we actually need to do something with it, which was really interesting that they're already at that point.
The bit that I don't quite understand, and perhaps help me here, is if businesses move out of an area, why would you want to live in that area? I mean, sure. I mean, we're talking about central London. There's probably a lack of decent housing in central London that's affordable, etc. So whether it becomes more affordable housing, but you see what I'm saying? If one of the cultural things has always been, for anyone that I've known that's been in the middle of London, is they've wanted to live and work in London, because you eventually hop out of work and you hop into a bar, or there's your playtime is there as well. Now, sure, I'm sure that the centre of London will continue to be sort of a playtime capital, where you're outside of work there's a million things to do, and it'll be still have that kind of culturally art wise that rich kind of melting pot. But if you don't work there and you've moved outside of London, will you want to travel I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
how does that work?
Thinking about it, because this was something when I read it and thought, yeah, you know, similar line of thought to what you were thinking. My thought potentially would be is would it be those people who still would spend, say, 3 days a week in a London office, and maybe 2 days at home, for example? Maybe they have suddenly thought, do you know what? I don't want to spend an hour and a half on the tube, or 3 or 4 buses, or whatever it would be. So it could be potentially those people, Graham, who still will spend half to, you know, anywhere between 50 and 100% of their time in an office, but actually have suddenly decided we don't like the commute. So I've got to go back to the office, but I don't want to spend hours getting home. So maybe it'll be those people potentially who still need to have that requirement and actually want to be a bit closer to work. Maybe previously, because of pricing, they were living quite a distance away and therefore had to then commute in. I guess also, you know, affordability. I mean, you know, maybe people who've not been able to get on the property ladder suddenly have the ability to then get involved in those type of premises. Now, of course, you know, they talk about affordable. What that ends up looking like, who knows? But it's just interesting that they're already planning that sort of move from commercial to residential now. And I guess, you know, people who own a lot of the properties, which I guess are investments, pensions, etc., they need to do something about it. You know, they clearly can't just afford to sit on what will be empty space, and they've maybe recognized it and thought, you know what, we need to get onto this now. You know, we can't have another high street situation with commercial properties. We need to get someone in.
Perhaps it tells us something else as well. Perhaps it actually tells us that, you know, entrepreneurial businesses run by individuals, and there's been a lot of startups during this pandemic as well, an awful lot of startups. You know, maybe centre of London might be a place you want to, as a young entrepreneur, you might want to actually, or even an older entrepreneur, you might actually want to live. And actually, maybe it's just that these people are, you know, working from home, and that's it. It's as simple as that. If you can choose to be in the centre of London, that's your playground. But you know, you work from home, and then at night you go out and enjoy London. You know, and so does London become, or do like cities with these corporate buildings that get converted? Does it become an entrepreneur's playground? I don't know. That might be another part to it. So it may well be that you know, it may be for you know, rich entrepreneurial people working from home who want to live in the city centre. But I'm sure on a lot of levels there will be a lot of management who will move further afield. And we'll see people moving more towards suburbs, etc., so that they can get in as and when they want to. But you know, the majority of the time that they're in a little bit more of a green area. So
I mean, I know we touched on it the other week, but it does sort of go through my mind as to I wonder whether this whole thing has really put the cat among the pigeons with HS2. I know they've gone so far down the line, and you know, not too far from me, probably 4 or 5 miles away. There's a lot of that sort of preparation works taking place. But you do think, I wonder if this has caused people to have a think and go, well, actually, if people are going to be working from home more, do we need this expensive white elephant or whatever it would be called? You know, is it actually, you know, who's going to be using it? If it's all about increased capacity, do we need increased capacity if people are going to be moving less? You know, again, I was out on Tuesday this week, back on Monday this week, I should say, sort of out on the road, etc. And again, it was amazing how many of on the motorway, the signage saying minimise travel. And I know that's been a common theme, but I just wonder how much that will actually stick with people, and people will go, do you know what? I don't need to go to London. You know, actually, I'll do a Zoom call instead. So I'd be really interested to see what impact is there on Virgin or, all the railways actually when we are encouraged back to work? Because there was something, again, I was reading yesterday, and I can't remember the source of it, so I can't give you the right numbers, but they were working on the basis that it would only be back to 8, even, when we're back to some sort of normal, whatever normal is. I know people use that phrase a lot, but it would only get back to 80% of what it was before. So,
and then is it affordable?
Yeah,
as a service to run? That's the thing, I've
always found it strange though, Graham. I mean, when I go to London, I go to Birmingham International, which is the train station at Birmingham Airport.
Yeah,
it's an hour and 10 minutes from there into Euston. There's only so much time you can save me from that. By taking 10 minutes off that journey, what's that actually achieving? It to me, that's irrelevant, unless you're going to sort of half the time of a journey, but that's not physically possible. It does make you think. I wonder if there's been conversations somewhere, especially with the way, we talk about the size of the national debt and all that sort of thing. I do wonder if there has been conversations and said, that expensive train set we were building, do we maybe need to have a little rethink about it?
Very expensive train set, very expensive. Yeah. Now, talking about getting back on the road, another subject that I want to bring up today is this one, which I did. Guess what? I did a poll on this.
Wow, you do surprise me.
Yeah, no, I did. So we've seen it announced that potentially by the end of this month, the first slightly automated or slightly driverless cars within remit. Because let's understand this. I think it's to do with at low speeds. Right. You can put it into a control mode that will actually drive the car. Okay. But you still have to stay alert and, then take control again, etc. But it's the beginning of this new dawn of AI. What do you think about that? I mean,
I have to say it's not one for me. I have to say, you do see how a lot of people have sort of relaxed with things like sat nav and things like that, and you'd question that has their awareness and their focus on the road. You can get involved in mobile phones and things like that, but if you start introducing semi-automation, are people just going to become a lot more relaxed? And and is it going to create more problems? Would I want to get in a car that's driverless? I don't think so. I have to say it doesn't appeal to me, but clearly there's been a huge amount of investment in it, both from the manufacturers and obviously there's been conversations seriously high at government and council level. So they must be comfortable with it. But I have to say, it's not something I would be advocating. To me, it just seems a step too far.
Yeah. So these are, just to be clear, these are automated lane keeping systems, ALKs. Right, and that's the first type of hands-free driving that will be legalized in the UK, and that could be by the end of this year. Now, when I did the poll, this might surprise you. 34% reckon that's a good thing, 39% bad thing, and 27% not sure. So really, people are quite on the fence about this.
That surprises me. The result of that poll is that closed, Graham, or is that still going? That one.
That poll is still open, but let's just have a look. That's up to 486 votes so far.
So it's a pretty good representation of people's thoughts. It's almost a bit of a third, isn't it? Situation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think some of the positives that people were bringing out is the fact that things like, well, people do get tired driving.
Yeah. And
therefore, potentially this could cut down on accidents, etc. People are, from a work perspective, and this will be interesting here. Okay. From a work perspective, people have always, when people have been out in the car certainly doing something like a sales job for people, they've always seen that whilst they're out on the road, they still should be contactable, and it's important they get back to clients and everything else, and regardless of firms saying, no, we have a driver's policy that when you're out on the road, you shouldn't be looking at your phone, you shouldn't be doing this, etc. But at the same time, the internal pressure is, why aren't you getting back to your client? Why are you not booking another appointment? Why are you not doing this? So it's a bit of a juxtaposition there, and ultimately, and I don't know how police would police this, but would this enable somewhere along the line, if people did need to work whilst they were driving?
Yeah.
If you had your hands free on, would you be entitled to work? So difficult, this.
Yeah. I've just got this image of sort of someone just sat in the back of a car, almost on a laptop, Graham, almost just typing away whilst the car's almost in effect being virtually chauffeur driven.
Yeah. I don't think we're anywhere near that.
No.
I think the technology is probably going to be, to begin with, as I say, at a point where if you feel like you just need a little bit of a mental break from driving for a minute, you literally let the car take over. Or if you're, I suppose, from an anxiety and worry point of view, I mean, there must be people that are on the road that actually find, especially when they get onto something like a motorway, for example, and the speed of the traffic is pushing you to go faster and faster, there will be people that are like, well, I don't want to go above the speed limit, or I don't want to do, I don't want to lose my license. So, and actually maintaining a speed is difficult. But then, I don't know.
Did I not read something about, was it a week or 2 weeks ago? Weren't there a couple of people killed in the US with some driverless stroke, semi-driverless setup? When you suddenly start thinking, when you start hearing things like that can't be good news, can it? When you're looking to roll this sort of solution out.
Well, that was the opposite side of the debate around that poll, was that people were saying, look, think about it. Your computer crashes in the office. Effectively, would you like your computer to be crashing when you're doing X amount of miles an hour going down the motorway? It does. I mean, things go wrong. I not recently, touch wood, but I have had a car where the computer's just given out. And suddenly you've got no control whatsoever over that vehicle. That's the problem. That's why I used to love my Escort Estate Mark II. It was fantastic. It didn't have a computer on it, and you knew if you lifted the bonnet as well, you knew how everything worked. It was obvious, right? You go, that's a distributor cap underneath that. Look at the spark plugs. If you get, you take them out occasionally, you clean them, put them back. That's a battery. You lift up a bonnet of a modern car, you go, what the hell? Put it down again.
Where's the engine? It must be in the boot.
What is that under there? And that's that's the problem, isn't it? If it's electric, it's a computer, they do go wrong. What's the backup plan? I'd have to be really convinced that there was in the safety system of a vehicle like that if something went wrong, there was an override. It would take me off the road slowly, allow me control to get it off the road slowly, and park it before the AA came and went, oh, can't help you there.
But, I mean, you look as well. I mean, we've had all this, not just touching on the cars, but look at the whole smart motorway piece as well. Where that was almost brought in to keep the traffic flowing, to try and minimise on problems, etc. And there's been, I think there's one stretch in particular of the M1, I think, isn't it, between sort of Nottingham and Sheffield, where there's been, multiple deaths from this system that's been brought in to sort of keep traffic going. And I think they said there'd have to be, there'll be no more smart motorways made without there being sort of further investigation, etc. So it's interesting that actually we're talking about driverless cars, to what degree, but actually there's almost a bit of a whole sort of reboot around our whole smart motorway piece. So again, you talked about computers there, smart motorways. I'm sure there was an element of human intervention, but it's probably driven by data coming back from cameras, etc. So if we've got a problem with our roads, and the smartness of our road system, are we really ready to be introducing smart cars, as it were?
It's really interesting you talk about that. It's the M25 is my biggest experience of that. I think you probably will have experienced that yourself going around the M25. I've always thought it's pretty ludicrous. Always thought it's pretty, because you get this gate almost like a game, where you get onto it and it says you're now on smart motorway, etc. And you've got to adhere by the speed limit that's on the thing at any one point. You're driving along at 50 miles an hour and you get quite close to that bridge, and then all of a sudden it goes 40 and you're like 40. And everybody suddenly goes 40. And it's just like, oh. And you think, that's actually dangerous, isn't it?
Everyone just slams the brakes on, don't they?
Everyone slams the brakes on because they think, oh, I'd love to know from anybody that actually is involved in that system at all somewhere. What is the sort of, from the point where it changes from one speed to another, what's the give and take?
I think it's 5 seconds. I think for something in my mind says you've got something like 5 or 6 seconds to adjust your speed, so it doesn't just kick in straight away. I think it's got something tells me 5 or 6 seconds, but I'm sure there's someone out there who probably knows. That
would be great to know that how many. And not in terms of seconds, because we can't necessarily compute that. In terms of roughly, in terms of average cars lengths going through, how many cars back? So from if you came right up to that sign and then it changed, how many cars could get through at the faster speed before it suddenly went right? No, you're speeding now. We're going to clobber you for that.
I was just looking, Graham, as we were chatting there, whilst you were talking, just seeing what that piece was about smart motorways. It was actually saying any new all-lane runnings, which is smart motorways, would need radar technology installed to detect stopped cars. So clearly, they've recognised that something else needs to be put in place. And they go, it's not. We're talking about driverless cars, but it does make you think. We've already flagged some sort of issues around our smart motorways. Should we not be getting that right before we start introducing these driverless cars? But it's it's an interesting one, isn't it? Really, as to technology is excuse the pun, driving us that way. However, we've brought a system in that isn't exactly doing what it says on the tin, and has unfortunately caused a number of fatalities in certain parts of the country.
I guess from an ergonomics point of view, if we're going to bring it around to the grand topic of ergonomics, and I try occasionally, I guess if you take out some of the mechanics of a car long term that you require in order to drive that car, the car itself could actually become much more comfortable.
It could do, but it was interesting what you were saying about people working and all that sort of thing. Actually, one of the things we've talked about with a number of our guests is taking breaks on a regular basis. So actually, when you were mentioning this before, it was running through my head. If people therefore are feeling tired and then hand over to the car to drive its way home, what they need to do is take a break, get out the car, change their position, have a stretch, take their eyes away from the screen, etc. So actually, from an ergonomics perspective, yes, they could probably do something with the design of the seats, etc., because you haven't got to be in a position to drive the car necessarily. But actually, is it discouraging breaks, which really are key to improving? We've talked about this about people working from home, etc., is making sure you're moving on a regular basis. I know our sort of mutual friend Mr. Berry often talks about taking a beat and getting out at lunchtime, etc. Actually, will that encourage people to not take a break, and therefore potentially those musculoskeletal issues that they're experiencing in the car actually get worse? Who knows?
No, very true. And actually, with that as well, adversely, if you're able to work in the car, say we get to that point where you're actually able to work in the car, then actually that long car journey that you would have had before, where yeah, there was the pressure to do the work maybe in the car, but actually you couldn't concentrate fully on that. You had to concentrate on driving. But that actually, in a way, that was quite a mental break as well, away from the work. So again, if you if you literally get in the car and then start to work and the car's driving you, and then when you get to that meeting, you're straight out and into a meeting, etc. You haven't had a break from work either. So
how many good creative ideas from salespeople have come when they are just driving along with the radio on, just kicking a few things around in their head whilst they're not distracted. So think of all those good ideas that maybe wouldn't have happened. And also, what used correctly from using a hands-free kit or whatever it would be. I know that's another sort of area where there's talk around not even allowing people to have conversations. But whilst it can be done, we all, to a degree, will have a conversation on a correct hands-free set. That's creative time. That's, relationship building time. That that we've lost an element of that because of not being able to see people. Actually, would it take away from some of that creative relationship building time? So again, it potentially has its advantages in terms of work being done, but actually, what cost? What do we lose instead by not having that free time?
One area of sort of motorway smart design that I've seen on the news of late, and I think it was Japan. It's always Japan or China, something like that, which I thought was really very clever. And it was a driverless vehicle, I believe, as well. Was a sort of rescue vehicle that was and it may have been even an ambulance that actually went down the central reservation. Almost like on a rail type system.
Yeah.
So if you imagine you've got the two sides of your motorway, etc., and then down the middle where you've got that barrier, the barrier itself is also a rail, and along that rail can drive this kind of rescue kind of car. Now that to me does make sense, because how often have you been stuck on the motorway somewhere? You've seen there's been an accident and the police or the ambulances or whatever are struggling to get through the traffic.
Now, the first thing that comes to my mind on this one, Graham, is how do you get to the middle of the motorway?
What do you mean? How do you get to the middle of the motorway?
You're talking about the vehicle running down the central reservation, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. But how do you get to there? It's almost how do you get to that piece without crossing the lanes to get to the central reservation?
No. So it runs on that.
Yeah,
it runs on the middle, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to get onto that. It's on the middle of the motorway all the time.
Yeah, but at some point, if say it's whether it's maybe collecting someone who's injured, it's then got to get off there at some point, hasn't it?
Well, no, it doesn't have to get off there. The people or services or whatever get out of it and attend to whoever needs it from the central reservation. Then get back in it and off it goes again on its rail.
Yeah,
you see, that's quite clever. I thought, it just again, it's a little bit like why they started bringing in smaller cars or motorbikes in order to get to people first, because motorbike can weave in and out. Yeah. This is saying actually there's no barrier or no obstacle in the way. As long as the central reservation bit is protected in itself as well, and that doesn't get smashed up, as long as that is protected, this vehicle can run along that central reservation bit. Someone can get out of it and can get to the person very, very quickly who needs the support. It was quite a clever idea. Have you seen talking about ergonomics? Going into 2021, we're approaching, a good way into the year now. It's actually going to be May soon. Have you seen it? Have you seen anything new coming along in terms of design or anything? I'm
trying to think. I mean, we've got one or two things up our sleeve, but it's a little bit too early to announce them. So I'll keep. I will share them in due course. We have one or two things that will be quite interesting. I'm trying to think. We've seen a nice product from our friends at Contour, haven't we? That I know we've touched on. So that's with their travel roller mouse, which is a nice product. That's quite an innovative piece. Nothing. I think there's lots of things happening, Graham. I think manufacturers like ourselves, obviously, as change has taken place, and it looks like we know what the long-term piece will be. We'll be looking at these things now. So I think you will see probably from halfway through this year towards the end of the year, a lot of those new solutions coming out that will adapt to how people are working in the future. You know, from a manufacturer's perspective, it isn't always as straightforward as just sort of flicking a switch and going, actually, we brought this new product out, it does da-da-da-da-da. I think that is, from our perspective, is certainly going on. So from a backer perspective, we'll see more things coming out through the second half of the year. Was there anything you've seen in particular that that's caught your eye or appealed?
I've seen a lot more pods. I have to say, I've definitely seen an awful lot more pod design. And by that, if people don't know what I'm talking about, there is these kind of pods in the middle of the office where you can have a sort of breakout meeting, etc. And there's been some quite weird designs. I'll say weird, innovative designs in terms of those. There's been some that are quite pop-up, in their nature, etc. as well. I have no idea in terms of the sort of cleanliness of those, or how that works in terms of COVID, etc. I know some of them are touting that they are very, in terms of air system, etc. They've got UV killing of COVID within the space, etc. And it's all wipe clean, and it's a protected environment, so maybe that's better, etc. I just wonder whether anyone's got any experience of more of that happening, and whether people are actually going back to the office to use those as well. That's the thing. It's
strange though, isn't it, when you think we're now told we can go to a pub, we have to stay outside, or a restaurant, and there's lots of air circulating around. Is someone not going to go to the office and go, okay, you've got to sit in this pod with that person, and they're going to go, you can tell me about the air system and all that sort of thing, but do I want to get up close and personal with someone in a confined space? It almost seems to be a bit of a paradox.
No, I totally agree. I'd love to if there's a manufacturer of a pod type system listening at all throughout the week, I'd love to get some insight into that, because I'd love to know how that works. I mean, it's a little bit like my wife and I saw someone trying to hitch a lift over the weekend. And I said, that's never going to happen, is it? That's never going to happen. And he literally was there hours. I mean, once upon a time, most people will drive by someone trying to hitch a lift these days and go, no, not on your Nelly. But, occasionally there will be someone that, would pop up and go, oh, I'm going in that direction. They give them a lift. But I mean, now at the moment, someone you don't know whether they're vaccinated, you don't know whether they've got COVID or whatever, you're going to let them sit in the passenger seat of your car. And
maybe if you insisted they took a lateral flow test, Graham, maybe before you let them in.
Oh yeah, because you just got a lateral flow test sitting around in your glove box, excuse me, sir, could you do a lateral flow test before we go anywhere? That's quite interesting, isn't it? The whole lateral flow test. Do you think, do police officers, when they stop you now, do they make you do a lateral flow test before anything else?
I'm concerned that you're asking that question, Graham, as if I get stopped by the police on a regular basis.
No, I'm just interested. I mean, from a safety point of view, from their own safety, do they need to do that? I don't know. Or can they combine that with a drink drive test at the same time? It's all in the mouth, isn't it? Actually, it's similar in a way to a test for drugs, I think, where they actually do a wipe of the mouth. Surely you could have a test that does both at the same time.
We've got some good news, sir. You've passed the test. Well, you haven't got COVID, but you're still over the drink drive limit. So it's sort of the good news, bad news, the good cop, bad cop sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not sure about the pod thing. Definitely, I will say that there has been a lot more interest out there in terms of outdoor space design and biophilia as well. I think that's definitely something that I've seen quite a lot of posts about recently on LinkedIn when it comes to sort of office design, is that because we've all gained a much deeper appreciation of the great outdoor space, offices now need to, if we want people to go back into an office space, we need to take greater kind of appreciation of bringing a bit of the outside in, and if offices have got nice green areas around the building, why aren't they being used?
You'd think there'd be quite a lot of investment where, as you say, where people have got that outdoor space, is creating outdoor offices. Now, I know in this country it's very difficult and it would be hit and miss, but you'd like to think those businesses that maybe have the ability to do it will be looking to create some more permanent outdoor areas in terms of where they can meet, and getting people away from the office and, getting creative and get people outdoors. There's an opportunity there. We're always going to have the problem in this country with weather. That's always going to be the fly in the ointment, is the fact that the day you plan an outdoor meeting, it chucks it down and it's 4 degrees and everyone's there in layers, and it's not really doing what it's meant to be there for. But you would think you'd see a lot more people thinking about that anyway, in terms of those sort of creative spaces being outdoors, rather than just being a case of converting 3 or 4 offices into a creative space, actually going beyond that and going to the extremes of your property.
I know in a previous business I looked at hiring at one point Center Parks, for example, as a team venue to go and have a meeting over a weekend, etc. But you have to make that work. And don't get me wrong, I love Center Parks, going there for my birthday this year, hopefully, fingers crossed. But you've got to have quite a big team. But whether other places now that have got outdoor spaces, and maybe this is something for especially in parts of the country like this where you've got farmers with fields and whatever, creating a meeting space where some of it's indoors, some of it's outdoors, it's available for it's all Wi-Fi'd up, it's all powered up, etc., for a team to turn up, go for a walk, have a meeting outdoors. It's easier to socially distance. I'd be up for that.
I did read a piece where it was to do with the government in the Republic of Ireland as opposed to Northern Ireland, and they were sort of this whole sort of drive away from the office. There was talk about buying up old rural pubs that would obviously weren't trading anymore. The sort of the whole impact of the smoking ban and all that sort of thing has impacted pubs everywhere. And I mean, all around all around this country, you see sort of empty pubs. But the idea was that they would be turned into sort of local meeting rooms that you could hire. Now, again, obviously they'll have quite a lot of outdoor space, so that's quite an interesting concept. That someone was going, actually, what have we got lots of? We've got lots of empty pubs. Let's create rural meeting spaces, which again would be both indoors and outdoors. And again, it does make you think, is that something else that could be tapped into existing business? You don't have to create new buildings, you just have to go and adapt what's already there. So you're not building on greenfield space, you're actually taking brownfield developed businesses. We've touched on retail and city centres, but actually, what about using something further afield potentially? So it was something the Irish government were looking to do over a few years, was purchase unused pubs and turn them into creative spaces.
Well, I think there's a huge environmental piece here, and as you say, do we need to build any more buildings for work? There's a lot of space that's lying dormant that could be used really effectively. And there's a lot of, you and I both know, having been out on the road over the years, there's a lot of road sometimes between places. You know what I mean by that? You'll go to a conurbation somewhere where there's quite a lot of business, and then you have to drive a long way between the next bit, and somewhere some of the places in between there's absolutely nothing. And sometimes when you're trying to arrange something with a client, you try and look for somewhere in between, and you think, well, there's a pub, but it's not actually ideal necessarily for a proper training session, or it's okay for a quick meet and greet and saying hello. But if we wanted to actually do something with them as a client, and maybe in the future that there will be more development of that, and then it gives everyone in that party a nicer opportunity. It's a day out from that office as well, or for all of those people it's a great opportunity to go out somewhere where they on neutral territory, that the supplier can go out to neutral territory as well, and and have everything there that they need in order to conduct the kind of training or business that they need to do. I think we should see more of that. Certainly locally to here, one of the local eatery places has converted a lot of the barn space around it into sort of hire out meeting spaces, and they've got some outdoor space as well to that. So I think we'll continue to see an increase in that, so that people have got a choice as to when I'm going to spend a day out, let's go somewhere really nice to spend the day out. I think it's got massive advantages to it, And
as you say, you don't need to be. I don't, like you say. We're not construction industry experts, but there's that. To me, I pass that many empty buildings when I'm out and about. That surely conversion of what's already there, rather than building and digging more, is surely the way that's got to go forward. You've got a huge skilled construction workforce. Let's get them focusing on conversion rather than building. So I mean, what have we got lots of? We've got lots of empty pubs, we've got lots of empty retail space. Let's see something really proactive with it that people want.
It may be that we need to see a change of some legislation in terms of buildings and in terms of what's listed, etc. Because I know converting something that's potentially got any kind of listing to it or part of it or whatever can be very costly, as opposed to actually just starting from fresh on a piece of greenfield land. But maybe we need to just see some changes politically there as well, to enable people to convert something that already exists, which is actually beginning to look like a bit of a tatty hole. Dog's dinner, which you drive past. I mean, for example, coming in and out of Birmingham, there's some lovely buildings, but there's also some really wonderful period buildings which are just going to ruin. And you just think, well, why can't someone convert those and make those into something?
And as you say, a lot of it's probably people hamstrung by legislation that to do that to that building, you've got to do this, and this. And people go, forget it. I'll buy that piece of land next door and I'll build a brand new building there. And you're thinking, well, what an absolute waste. Yeah,
there's ill logic there somewhere. So, it'd be great to see that. But, I think as 2021 rolls on, it would be really interesting to see how these things develop and how the office develops. I mean, when's the next date in terms of major change? That's
is it 17th of May? Isn't that when we're getting a lot more hospitality and hotels open? And then is it the 21st of June? So we've ticked off 2 or 3 dates, and we've got another 2 coming up fairly soon, haven't we? So I think the next one will be that internal hospitality piece, and then it's that old game on again from the 21st of June. As I say, I'm still a little bit, is that going to really happen? I mean, you'd love it to, wouldn't you? But and numbers all look very good, but you've got to expect possibly a little bit.
It's conflicting, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing. When I look at it every day, the thing that gets me is that seems to be a little bit of contradiction. I mean, today on my phone, not only did I have texts about sort of death figures down again, etc., but on the other hand, you had these are the areas in Britain that have seen the highest increases in the last few days. You just think, what data do I actually look to here? Things are going up, but this is going down. I don't really know where we are with all of it, and I think only time will tell. I mean, certainly there seems to be on a daily basis good news around the vaccine, and the sort of vaccine drive seems to be making a massive difference, and helping us get on top of it. But at the same time, we've got new variants coming in all of the time. How they're getting in, I don't know. That's a $1 million question. But new variants coming in all of the time. New cases in different areas, etc. So, and we still have half the population unvaccinated at the moment. So there's still an awful long way to go before any of that. So it's going to be a very, very interesting year. That's for certain. Stephen, thank you very much for coming again.
Enjoyed it.
Next week we have a guest. So Jodie Greer next week. Going to be talking a little bit about inclusion, diversity, and all of those things in the workforce. Hopefully we may have a chair manufacturer in the next week or two as well, to talk about all things seating and sitting on your backside during the pandemic. But for now, thanks for tuning in to Wow Ergonomics. From me, Graham Coath, and
me, Steven Howe.
There you go. And if you're listening back to this on Spotify, thanks very much for taking the time to do it. You can now listen to this because you're driving in a car again, which is one of the wonderful things about it. Bye for now.
Bye.